I request everyone, please, we will start. We will start our session. Okay, welcome everyone. Today we had our 670 episode. We will discuss on sustainable finance, and we have our world famous speaker, Professor Sharif. He worked for Apple. He developed the ecosystem of Indian software industry. He's a serial entrepreneur. He raised around $100 million for different startups. We have our another world famous speaker, Professor David Smith. Professor David Smith is a CTO of ETT. It's one of the largest holding company from Texas. We had our another global speaker, Professor Donald. He was a scholar for Stanford University, USA. And we have our very exclusive and smart audience. They work for Central Bank of Bangladesh and different banks industry they are working. So let's start, and we will discuss about the sustainable finance and what is the view of the Western world, how they think about the emerging economy and how they can help the emerging economy for sustainable finance. This is our major discussion for today's session. Professor Sharif.
Okay, very good. All right, let's see. Let me get my, am I on now, or can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, very good. All right, very good. Let's see, real quickly. I'm from San Francisco. I'm an urban environmental planner and a serial entrepreneur. I use virtual reality for healthy cities. And, you know, a little background, I do have some international finance backing. I worked with the World Bank when I was at Bechtel, and I managed the loan drawdown for $1 billion project in Cairo, Egypt in 1980. And we had 17 loans, 11 international development agencies led by the USAID and World Bank. So I'm very familiar with how you set up finance drawdown for contractors, 50 countries, you know, with $1 billion back then. And so I'm familiar with the complexities of multiple, you know, international infrastructure financing. We did the fundraising as well as the competitive bidding and the payout, which is not easy, and it's very difficult. And with climate change now, it's even more difficult because in the past we were only looking about, you know, short-term electrical production, and that's it. We didn't really worry about climate at all, frankly, in the 1980. And we only looked at local environmental impacts. So today, if I were somebody at Bechtel, for example, doing very large, mega projects in infrastructure, I would be thinking twofold. One is immediately is adaptation, which is currently we already have climate disasters like Bangladesh's flooding, and you have all these problems already. So first, you need to harden your cities or future-proof your cities against flooding and all these sea rise and problems that you can already predict. I mean, it's not, you already have the data for that. So I think that's probably the first priority. In San Francisco, for example, we're putting up a seawall, which is a couple $100 million, because like New York, we're going to get flooded fairly soon. The big fear is not the sea rise, that takes time, is rather the short-term flooding from hurricanes and typhoons. And that will swamp you, as you know, or massive monsoons or things like that. So I think that's the first priority. The second priority then is more long-term future-proofing and resilience, which is more mitigation. So how do you prevent, decarbonization? But I'll be frank, the global north is emitting most, and China and India are emitting most of the carbon. Whereas Bangladesh is not really, it's really the victim of most of this carbon buildup. So as much as you do need to worry about carbon buildup, because you do, whether it's farmers burning crops or using wasteful gas very inefficiently, I think you could do things there. But I do think long term for your development, you really need to be thinking about future proofing. I mean, for example, when I was at Bechtel, we think out 100 to 250 years out. Okay, it takes 50 years to build a city or a new town. But when we design a road or highway, universities, you don't rip them out in 50 years. I mean, they're going to be there for several hundred years. So that's the kind of timeline. Now, in terms of finance, China is probably the leader in green bonds. So we use municipal bonds, and typically they're like 30 to 50-year payback. But I think now you might even have to extend it further, like 30 to 70 years almost. And so I think you need to look at green bond financing, how you structure that. Look at China, but then tailor it for Bangladesh and India in that portion. And I think for the West, we're looking at, okay, so the West doesn't feel the damage like you do, but we do get affected. So you have to ask yourself, what is the impact of the damage done to Bangladesh or one of the local countries on trade and business with the West? For example, Bangladesh has a lot of tech industries now, like India was like 30 years ago. So that's going to be impacted, your future industries. So that's one thing I would look at. So I think there's a lot of opportunities to be kind of open-minded, thinking and innovate in finance, especially long-term green bonds for infrastructure, because I think that's the only way you can tackle it. Because, right now, like Silicon Valley, we only think out 5 to 7 years for venture capital. That's way too short. I mean, that's just a startup company. We're talking, 100 years, 50 to 100 years. So that's a totally different timeline. So I think I'm going back to Bechtel. You have to think way out. I mean, minimum 10 years, but for your flooding, but longer term, it's like 50 to 100 years really is the way I would structure all your green bond financing. But that's just my view from, like a infrastructure.
The World Current Economy Forum with Green Tech Foundations, we are working in Bangladesh and India and 100 different countries. We are actually advocating for emerging economy, and especially we want countries like Bangladesh, how we can uplift ourselves, and we need more support from Western world, especially GFANs, can help us a lot to get more finance for our beloved Bangladesh. Professor Nick Palveda, one thing I always said, and I know that you are a big fan of emerging economy, and your organization actually supporting 100 different countries. You are also running US pension scheme. You are a CEO for this organization. You are a very successful businessman and professor. So what is your advice for sustainable finance in Bangladesh? How we can minimize the gap in between emerging economy and developed nations, and how we work together, and how we bring more benefit for emerging economy? I want your US perspective, but definitely, we are from Bangladesh, so how we can help each other.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Sharif. I think the number one thing is to actually have a plan. And this is a problem that we have here in the United States as relating to our Social Security Trust Fund, which is going basically broke in about 12 years. And we have no plan as to how to restore it or even make it solvent. Then we have the Medicare Trust Fund. It's going broke before the end of this decade. No plan to restore it. I think the most important thing that you can have is a plan. In other words, if you want to structure any financial deal, you have to have a plan. And the thing is, you have to show investors, especially if you want to borrow money, how this plan is going to finance and return the investment. But we see today, especially in the United States, we don't have short-term plans. So our colleagues talking about 50 years or 100-year plan, we don't have a 5-year plan. We don't have a 10-year plan. Frankly, we have no plan. And so when it comes to economics and finance, if you're in business, you usually have plans that are 1 year, which are going to achieve your goals and objectives, 5-year plans, 3-year plans, 10-year plans, contingency plans, plan B, in case plan A doesn't work out, Now you get to the government, no plan. Well, the thing is, Sharif, okay, a good, intelligent investor is not going to put their hard-earned capital into an idea that has no plan. So I think the most important thing is to actually have a plan that makes sense to an investor, and then it's easier to follow up on.
Thank you, Professor Nick. Especially, I know that you are running the media industry, especially for TV. I told you, Bangladesh has 180 million people. West Bengal has, East and West Bengal have altogether 300 million people. It's a big opportunity for us, and especially we want that media like you. We need a PR. We need more branding. We want to attract the global investors, the global community. They have to know about us. Definitely, we are developing long-term plan and short-term plans. Which White House, the U.S. government, and the financial industry, they support more country like Bangladesh. I think we can enhance the capacity. And definitely, we always say the developers do not invest your money for where maybe you can solve water problem, air problem, housing problem, healthcare problem, and we can create win-win situation for both of the country. Professor David Smith, you run a holding company. What's your view about sustainable finance?
Is that question directed to you?
This is a great question.
Okay.
Nick, I think you came over this way. Sharif, that's a great question you look at because, as we've talked in many different venues with you, that when we look at sustainability, it is a problem that geographical boundaries do not define. And it's a problem that entities, commercial entities and government entities cannot solve by themselves. So if I began to look at how the whole financial industry fits in that, you see that the financial sector holds enormous power because it helps bring, as was being said, funding into it, the existence. It helps bring awareness to the issues of sustainability by allowing dollars for research and development of alternative energy sources, or supporting businesses that follow fair and sustainable labor practices, by putting money into the agriculture sector and into the manufacturing sector that allows equipment to be changed out to others that is more suitable for green finance. So just to step back 1 second, what sustainable finance is, it's defined as investment decisions that take into account the environmental, the social, and the governance, are the term we hear a lot today, ESG factors of an economic activity or project. And this can be in the commercial sector, it can be in the government sector, and particularly if I pull the academic environment in with it, this is places where the intersection of these should be up front and center as we talk about it. And, even some of the factors should be looking at how do we mitigate the effects of the climate crisis, or how do we use more sustainable resources? And, some of these go even to things like human resources, consumer protection. How do we diversify hiring practices and others? And how does the governance change, particularly as you look at how governance works across these various sectors? So to kind of put some numbers around this, last year, the value of green bonds traded was $2.36 trillion. And where we're seeing today with that trend is next year, the green bonds are going to be over $4.5 trillion. And we're seeing that. And we're seeing now this whole sustainable finance area is we're seeing now structured financial activities being put in place to help create these outcomes. In the early days, as we began to see the movement towards sustainable finance, most of the activities were ad hoc. And, I agree 100% with what Nick was saying about the requirements to plan. And as we look into particularly sustainable finance, you need to have a near term, how do I put it in an operational plan? How do I go midterm and put it in a strategic plan? And then how do I actually long term? How can I take the idea of sustainable finance and how do I build that into our corporate culture? How do I build that into the governance of our company level and actually our government level too? Because it needs to play all three places. As Nick said, you have to go ahead and look at the near term, the operational elements. But those are usually local initiatives. And to truly have an impact in sustainability, you have to look beyond local because it's a global challenge. So that's where both the strategic planning comes into place around sustainable finance. And even more importantly, how do you change the culture? How do you put the elements in place that will work cross organizational boundaries? Dr. Sharif knows that one of my passions, and I've been talking about for a couple of decades, is that today most problems are system of systems problems. Sustainability is a prime example of a system of systems approach because every element in it, which you try to look at as unique, it is not, it's element. And where you make a change here, it affects 4 others and they ripple back across too. So as you, as leaders begin to look at sustainable finance, you have to understand it's a complex problem you're dealing with and a complex issue. And you have to bring that type of thinking into it and how it's going to work as you begin to see, for example, how do we help organizations transition to the concept called net zero? And how do you begin to get there? And how do you recreate a way of looking at loans, debt mechanisms, investments, and others that minimize the impact on the client of even regular projects? And how can I build this into my culture? Because people are the biggest issue when it comes to creating a sustainable future. Technology's coming, but it's the people and their processes and the way they work day to day, not just within their organization, but across the organizations. You know, I can do a real good job in my company, but if the companies in the next 3 nations around me aren't doing anything to help, your impacts are going to be minimized. And that's why sustainable finance is so important. And it needs to be looked at both the micro and the macro environments to see how can you use those environments in finance to create change, and particularly sustainable change for sustainable economics, for sustainable environmental. So those 3 sustainings in that hardly complex sentence really have to work together to have an impact. And Dr. Sharif, I think that's probably enough opening comments here.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor David Smith. And I know that you are working with NASA for solving wicked problem, and you will be happy. Country like Bangladesh, we have many young talented, those who solving these wicked problems, and especially emerging economy has a lot of problems. We need a lot of entrepreneurs who can solve the social problem with sustainable finance. So hopefully your support and collaboration can uplift country like Bangladesh. Professor Donald, you work for Stanford University.
Before we go there, you're actually correct in that entrepreneurship with new ideas, new partnerships, new public-private partnerships with young entrepreneurs is going to be one of the keys for beginning to enact that social change that's going to be necessary to have really a large impact. Sorry, Sharif, but I should have said that earlier.
Yeah, thank you, Professor David Smith. Professor Donald, you work with Stanford University. If you share a few of your experience with our audience, because innovation is most important thing to attract sustainable finance from GFANs and all of the global community? What you want to share with our audience?
Well, I think that one of the important things is that to kind of break it down, I think that we have to be careful about granularity, because when you're talking about finance, it can be all kinds of things. Like, for instance, there's a whole kind of model of financing where people, investment funds have been, and universities and things have been divesting themselves of things that are environmentally unhealthy, oil companies and things like that, in theory. So what you're looking at is these large aggregations of money, like you get a pension fund or a university's endowment or things like that. These are aggregations. And if I wanted to, say, for instance, be a green investor, I can find green investment funds who go out and are careful not to buy stocks in companies that are not green companies. But if you really look into that, those are not actually, they're not vetted very well. There's no organization that there's no standards for them. So it's kind of a dicey way of doing it. And again, that's like at a huge level. But when you're thinking of it, sustainable investment, there's still another level where you're looking at the question of some particular project that somebody wants to do. That gets down more to the level of the entrepreneurial level. How is it that you're going to be able to invest in things that are going to have practical implications for you and for what you're trying to do? One company I'm working with right now, we've got this basically solar powered transportation system. And we're talking to, it's possibly we're going to start implementing in the Philippines and a couple of other, and Africa and a couple of other places, which is, it's interesting. So then how does this sustainable investment work in a case like that? Okay, it's just very sustainable. It's a transportation system, has solar power. It actually returns it returns energy to the grid. It does a lot of amazing things. It doesn't require, it's not as expensive. It's less resources, all the good sustainable things that you want to have. So how do you go about making something like that happen? And so what we do is we find places like cities in the Philippines who are interested in having something like that, and then we find a way that we can get a return on the investment once it's been built. Find investors in the United States that are willing to put in some money so that we can get the project going, and the sustainable investment becomes basically investing in something that's sustainable, but at a kind of the nuts and bolts way that you invest in companies in general. And when you think about that a little bit, though, the devil is in the details. Like, I know Sheridan and I have a long background in Silicon Valley tech companies. And tech companies have a model of investing where what you're doing is you're investing in the company itself. And the product that you're building is the company. And ultimately, the goal is to sell the company, because that's how you get your money back. So if you're working with angel investors and venture capitalists and things like that, that's the ultimate goal. But when you're building something like a transportation system, that doesn't make quite as much sense. So I'm working together with a person with a huge amount of experience with construction projects. And so another way to invest, to finance things in this particular case, is that you people invest in a project, and the project becomes an independent entity, and they get a return on the investment when the project is finished and it gets paid for. There's other models where it's design, build, design, operate, build. There's various kinds of things. And then what winds up happening is when we're working with a government, like a government of a city in the Philippines, then the government, it becomes a public-private partnership. So sustainable investment is similar to just regular investment. It's just a matter of the question is that somebody has to decide whether or not that they're willing to make the decisions. Like other people said, it's a kind of a cultural thing. Like, are you going to decide? And the biggest barriers to it are what's already there. So we're having a lot more luck getting people to adopt a system like that in countries outside of the United States, because the United States already has roads, it already has cars, it already has its whole transportation infrastructure built out. So we do much better talking to countries that don't have that all built out. So culture.
Thank you, Professor Dolan. We have some questions from audience.
What?
Yes, we have some questions from audience. We have some questions from audience. Audience
yeah.
want to ask some questions to our speaker.
Let me look.
Yeah, thank you. Yes. I want to share a good news because all of you are techno entrepreneurs. This is the first time in history in Bangladesh.
I want to just say that there's not going to be a technological singularity. That's just a silly idea that science fiction writers thought of. But that's the answer to that question.
We have questions from our audience. Yes, I just want to share that this is first time in South Asia. The Nikola Tesla has lots of innovations. The Malaysian government Khazanah, they already invest $105 million in our lab. This is first time with the help of European Innovation Alliance. We are launching our conference on Nikola Tesla next year, April 5 to 7. 25,000 scientists from around the world. It's Harvard, MIT, Stanford, NASA, all of the famous scientists, they are coming to Bangladesh, and we are innovating the new ecosystem, and we need more of your support because I know that more innovation comes, more investment comes. We need your support. So we have our audience. From audience, those who want to ask questions, you can ask questions to our speakers.
Well, I want to answer this question. There is not going to be a technological singularity. That's a science fiction fantasy. It's not going to happen. So that's not worth bothering with.
Yes, our question from our speakers, from our trainers, from our audience. So from audience, anybody have any questions?
Oh,
Hello,
okay.
this is Ahmed. I'm a green building expert, UGBC, consulting so many development to become sustainable development. What I heard from all of you is a different dimension of sustainability progress. So my question to either one of you, how we can really put it together? It seems like there's so many missing links in between development, investment, banking, people, and the knowledge. There's a huge amount of knowledge gap that we are carrying. So how really we can become a little bit more comprehensive, I can say. Please, anyone can answer this question. Thank you.
Okay, I'll jump in. I just wrote a book about that whole topic. Okay, I have an 8-year roadmap for urban decarbonization led by the C40 and 10,000 cities by 2030. And I gave out the roadmap like the Apollo moon mission, phase 1, 2, 3, and everything you need. I'm an urban. Okay, I worked at Bechtel on major projects. So we built Jebel. We raised $15 billion in the 70s, $60, $100 billion today. We had projects going out 50 years, 100 projects. Okay, so we ran it. We raised money from, the Saudi government and private banks and companies. So we built that out. So I took the Bechtel model of building out, but I accelerated to 8 years because you only have 8 years to get all the pieces in place. The actual implementation will take 30, 40 years to 20, 50, or 60. But what you need to do is just coordinate. And then I agree with Don and David, you need to have collaboration. And this is what happened. I did this back in the 80s in Bangalore, and they were trying to develop a software industry. And the problem in Bangalore was that they were always arguing about everything. They didn't have a clear focus. In Silicon Valley, we always say, like the moon mission, have a clear focus. What is your goal? Okay, in your case, it's sustainability. And then everybody rally around that, industry, government, academia, students, everybody. And if you work together toward a common goal, then you can do it. In Bangalore's case, their goal was to become the Silicon Valley of software. And so it was easy for Silicon Valley because we're software. So we said, well, we'll just partner with you. So we had a lot of programmers. We introduced a lot of companies like Intel and Microsoft to Bangalore to open up software centers there. And then, after the internet took off, they built, the software industry there. So we did that 30 years ago. No, actually, almost 40 years ago now, 1983, 4. Okay. So India proved that you could be one of the poorest nations in the world, but if you organize and work together, public-private partnership, everybody focused, with the Council Generals, in Silicon Valley and New York working with us to help coordinate the banks and companies. If you do that, you can achieve amazing things. And it doesn't take 50,000 people. They only had a handful of people, maybe a couple of dozen. But these people were critical. We had the Council General from San Francisco. We had the top ministries, electricity, power. We had the top IITs, and we had the local mayor, and that's about it. Okay, so just a handful of people totally built the Indian software industry. So what I would say today to challenge, and you can do it because you have a lot more knowledge now, is that you just say you want to be the Silicon Valley or the global south of sustainability and be the center of excellence. Okay, because it's going to require a lot of brain power. It's not about brute forcing it, okay? It's about using the least amount of money, using most innovation, creativity, just like India did. And when India, they said, we have no money, but we have a lot of smart students coming out of college with programming and engineering. So they used a lot of cheap, really smart people, and that's how they built it. So Bangladesh is no different. You have a lot of really brilliant people there, K through 12 and college. That's your future. And if you just harness it and focus on clear goals, and I agree with Professor Palaveda, you've got to have a clear plan. What is your plan? And, and focus on it. And the plan should integrate housing, education, energy, trade, and, education. And the key is going to be education training. I can tell you right off the bat, if your educators are not in front leading, because that's going to be everything. Because I can tell you in Silicon Valley, our leaders nowadays, they're not the old guys, they're the young people and the young professors who are in it for the next 40 years. And they're the ones that just really do it, and they can move fast. So I think we were using fax machines in the 80s. Today, you can do everything in real time. So it took Bangalore 10 years to take off. You could probably do it in 2 years today. 2 years. But that means using the cloud, AI, VR, everything, all the brains and technology to move really fast. Now, if you do that, then the private investors will look at you and say, these people are serious, they're organized, and then we can work with them. Because I could tell you most, Europe is kind of slowing down and Japan's slowing down. And so the really growth areas can be places like Bangladesh and India and Africa, right? That's where the future is for the world. And so we would like to work with you on a really, fast growth, and you could leapfrog technology just like Africa did with cell phone. They didn't bother with landlines, just went straight to mobile. So how can you leapfrog the West? Because you don't have all this legacy to deal with. So I think the opportunity space for Bangladesh. But anyway, but thank you so much.
Sharif, can I give an example of a framework that seems to be working?
Thank you. We just want to go for the concluding remarks. I want to give 1 minute, 1 minute, and 1 minute for all speakers, and we'll go for conclusions. Professor David Smith, 1 minute. What's your concluding?
Well, Sharif, thank you for the honor. Thank you for the honor of presenting to this group. This is a very important topic as we look at the future, not only of Bangladesh, but the region and actually the world. And part of what we've seen is we're seeing various frameworks put in place where you look at climate change mitigation, climate change adoption. How do you protect the water, the marine resources? There's a concept today of a circular economy. How can we implement that? How do we protect and restore the biodiversity in our ecosystems? And the key to the best practices I've seen is you need to target at least 1 or 2 of those objectives. But as you target those, make sure you're not damaging the other one. And make sure, like I said before, you look not just at your near-term operations and your longer-term strategic view, but how do I change our culture? Do I change it in the universities, change agents? Do I change it in the government? Do I change it in large corporations, medium-sized, entrepreneurship, and how to do that? How can I get the universities to play a role? Because there's a concept called the Technopolis. And to affect this type of change, you have to use all the elements of the Technopolis, the regulatory, the academic, all the business resources. And how do we pull that together to create this sustainable view? And finance, after all has to be paid for, is one of the very base elements for enacting this type of change. And Dr. Sharif, thank you for letting me be part of this very important discussion for the future of your country.
Thank you. Thank you. Professor Nick Palveta, what's your concluding remarks in 1 minute, because we'll start our training program. Professor Nick.
Yeah, I agree with what the other speakers say, Dr. Sharif. It's so important to know that you have the ability to scale, especially in Bangladesh. You're not weighed down like we are in the West with, hate to say it, with laws, regulations, infrastructure, that basically get in your way. Cost factor, Dr. Sharif, we're looking already. Our network, as a matter of fact, I'll talk to afterwards. I have a fund that has about 200 million to invest, and we're looking to actually do this in your neck of the woods, either in Pakistan or Bangladesh. Now, why don't we look in the United States? I hate to say the cost factor here in the United States is so much more expensive to develop than it is in your country. So you have a sustainable competitive advantage. You don't have the costs, you don't have the regulations, and you have the ability to scale. Okay, and scaling means if you take one idea, one concept, and you can distribute it all over the world. And that the scale, of course, we know, Dr. Sharif, we discussed it. Media is one thing that can be scaled. Technology is another thing that can be scaled. So whatever idea or opportunity you have that can be scaled is much more valuable than opening up a McDonald's down the street. I'm going to pick on McDonald's. I don't know if you even have them over there, but frankly, you can't scale it. It sits there, and that's where it is. But if you have a technological advance, and even an ESG type of format, you can scale it all over the world, Dr. Sharif, and that is a huge advantage. And that's one reason the tech companies, especially in Silicon Valley and around the world, are so much more valuable than opening up McDonald's down the street.
Professor Donald, just in 1 minute, just give your concluding remarks. We have our training program. So thank you for joining today's session. Professor Donald, just 1 minute concluding remarks.
I agree with what everyone said, and I appreciate that everyone's emphasized the fact that Bangladesh does have an advantage because we don't have the infrastructure already there. As I pointed out earlier, we have the transportation infrastructure. So coming up, it's way too expensive to change at a mile of road and of anything in Silicon Valley costs a lot of money. So we can't really do anything with it. So you do have the advantage that you can go a long way with what you have. But I want to just go back to what I say. Financing, the way that you finance things is kind of well known. And so what you need to do is develop relationships with people like perhaps Nick, people who are willing to work with you and work with your company. And as far as your universities and your companies and your organizations, the contacts that you make and the relationships you make with other people everywhere else become the flow of information. You can try and develop something yourself and figure out something completely yourself that you could just ask somebody and solve the problem in minutes that would take years if you tried to struggle to find out for yourself. So I just think that the more relationships you make, like doing this, everything that you do like this is an incredible advantage, and that's what I suggest.
Thank you. Thank you. We have our policy expert from Green Tech Foundation. He worked for Central Bank of Bangladesh. He actually majorly developed the green policy, sustainable policy for Bangladesh. I find there are many talented countries like Bangladesh, and that's why we build up talent economy. Mr. Moshe.
Thank you, Dr. Sharif. Thank you, professors. I would like to extend my heartfelt thanks to all the professors. You have extended your experience, and there was a time constant. Otherwise, we have been listening to you for hours together, and still you got to go to bed because it's approaching night. So thank you so much for your very good discussions. I have, and probably we all have enjoyed each moment of that. I would like to extend that, say that the Central Bank of Bangladesh it is very much passionate to sustainable financing, green financing. It's not like the other central bank, and Central Bank of Bangladesh is very much exception to that we have a sustainable finance taxonomy, we have green taxonomy, and we have so many policies that's related to green financing, sustainable financing. What I'd like to say that if a bank or financial institutions, they disburse out of the funded loan, it has to be 20% sustainable finance. And within that sustainable finance, it must be 5% of the green finance of the total term loan disbursement. What is Bangladesh Bank thinking next with the banks is that in the next year or some other days to come, that the finance will be increased with respect to sustainable finance. And that in the year of within the 2030, it should be that the 30% should be the sustainable finance, and within that 15% should be the green finance. And up to 2050, all the finance should be the 100% finance should be the sustainable finance, and within that 50% should be a green finance of the total term loan disbursement. We have sustainability rating methodology for the banks and financial institutions to perform their whole year performance, and with the 5 indicators there, that is what is the very contribution there to sustainable finance, green finance, corporate social responsibility activities, core banking issues, and then banking service coverages, and blah blah. So and also the green governance, there is also the compliances. So all these things need to be judged in both quantitative and qualitative manner in our sustainability rating methodology that you will find in the Bangladesh Bank website, that these are the top 10 banks and top 5 financial institutions for the 2020 for their contribution towards sustainability issues. Then you'll see for the year 2021 as well, top 5 banks, top 10 banks and top 5 financial institutions. What is the concern is that, yes, technological advancement introduction is badly required, but how extent we go to that is that technological advancement is fantastic, but then we got to see at the rules and regulations that when you go for digital financial services, how it will cope up with the current proceedings, because there should be supported by the law, the cyber law, the digital financing that will happen. Because you see, in Bangladesh Bank, we have a structured mobile financial services, MFS. But in the question of digital financial services, we have not yet structured the policy. So it is awaiting. So once it will be there, then it will be a huge upgradation towards the green financing and sustainable financing. Then another challenge is that when you talk about finance, we talk about sustainable finance. When you talk about sustainable finance, we like to have green finance. When you talk about green finance, we like to have inclusive green finance. Once we tell about inclusive green finance, it is a big challenge, because we like to facilitate the SME entrepreneurs as well as the underprivileged, non-served people. So there is a problem with the collateral issue. There is a problem with the cost of fund, but ultimately we got to manage the balance, and ultimately we got to hit towards inclusive green finance, as well as at the same time, over the long run, we got to make the community understood that in the long run, everybody, every corners will be benefited and every corners will remain happy. So there is a lot of discussions to be there, and I'm very much keen to discuss with you personalities in the days to come, in very soon. And Dr. Sharif would like to extend Dr. Sharif thanks, because he had made us to communicate it, to get in touch with you personalities. So we'll be continue our discussions, and because of the time constraint and other events that are coming up, so we'd like to extend our heartfelt thanks from our team, from our audience, that you have made the time, and we had a very good discussions from your end. We have learned a lot from you personally, but certainly we will not end up here. This is just the beginning, and we'll continue our discussions in the days to come in near future. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Nick, Professor Faridan Castino, Professor David Smith, and Professor Donald for your continuous support for World Talent Economy Forums. And Professor Nick Palveda, next year, February, we are launching CEO Club Summit in California. And you are developing $20 billion financial ecosystem in California. We have more plan in Singapore and in London. But as a Bangladeshi, I love to promote Dhaka. Why don't we develop another CEO Club Summit in Dhaka with Green Tech Foundations? Maybe we can develop a few billion-dollar ecosystems, and our local bank, financial institution can contribute, and our local entrepreneurs can get in touch with you. Thank you for all of your support. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye, and take care.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Take care. Okay.
Bye.
So please
Thanks.
join me. Okay, bye-bye. After একটু কফি দেন, দেন আমরা 10 মিনিট পরে শুরু করে দিচ্ছি। আমরা প্রিপেয়ার আছি আজকে 15 মিনিট।